Hello, beautiful human beings, and welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. Today, I'm going to be sharing my journey of movement, exercise, and how it's dramatically changed to support a transformation of my posture. If you check out my Instagram, you'll see that I did a post recently showing a before and after of the way that I stand and look standing and how my modern posture of hunched shoulders and my head poking forward has been improved dramatically through the use of a modality that I've been working with for around 2 years, more intensely, closer to 18 months, called functional patterns. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk about that journey and my recommendations for anyone that does want to get their body in tip-top shape long term. Now, if you're new to this podcast and you haven't yet left a review, please go do that. Or if you've been watching or listening for a while and you haven't left a review, that means a lot to me and it makes a big difference for the channel. So please do that. All right. So I have been athletically devoted my entire life since probably 4 or 5 years old, kicking the football and then playing every sport under the sun as a young man, and then growing up and being intensely into gym work and trying to get jacked and get shredded, and also being a long distance runner and recently training for a 100-kilometer ultra marathon. Exercise has always been a really big part of my life. In a way, it was kind of like my safety net. Now, I'm going to say up front, I've been addicted to exercise, and I've been conditionally attached to having a body, a sexy, strong, jacked body that I perceive will make me more lovable in society. And I've definitely experienced some body dysmorphia as well, where I would look at myself in the mirror and see a really frail, skinny, weak-looking dude, and I was actually massive at one point. And so my relationship with movement and fitness has often been fueled from an unhealthy place. And to have some compassion for myself, it was really an outlet for me growing up in a difficult circumstance. It's not like I had bad intentions and no reason to be like that. I was very, very shy, anxious, insecure, and dysregulated. And running, exercise, sport was a way for me to control how I felt. Now, for the last 5 years, I've been aware of the fact that I want to work on my posture. Maybe more, maybe the last 7. I'm going to say 7 to 10 years. I've been aware of the fact that I had developed a posture that was very symptomatic of a modern workaholic lifestyle. Head poking forward, shoulders rounded, quite often having a sore lower back and getting headaches a lot because of the positioning of my neck. And I just didn't prioritize it because I didn't feel that I had the time, and it just felt way too hard. I remember doing some postural work with one of my best friends from high school, an amazing osteo called Jordan Moncrief, and he was helping me with a modality called dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, or DNS. And just feeling the distance between where I was and then having an actual healthy posture, I found so difficult to accept. And it felt like an impossible journey. Every time I sat down, my butt would always be planted on the front of the seat, and then my whole back would be just laying like with the top of my back on the top of the chair. And so I'm just leaning back and then my head poking forward. And that was just the most comfortable way for me to sit. To actually sit upright my body had literally disformed to being non-aligned. So much so that to actually sit upright in a healthy, aligned posture was debilitating, exhausting. I could do it for a minute before I was like, ugh, now I'm going to poke my head back forward and round my shoulders again and curve my back. And so I've always had a really clear knowing that it's something that is going to be important. And if I continue to operate through life with that posture being that unhealthy and that misaligned, that I'm going to grow old and have a pretty out of shape body that deteriorates a lot faster. And about, I'm going to say 4 years ago or 5 years ago, what I recognized from an emotional perspective is that my body represented the consciousness state of how I felt as a teenager growing up. Feeling really shy and anxious, I was dipping my head, curving my shoulders over, and slouching and hiding. It was like my heart was being protected and shielded by that really rounded upper back, curving my shoulders over, rounding my shoulders over, and hiding my heart away. And my posture kind of formed around that. That real rounded upper back and the head poking forward, that upper back phenomenon is called a kyphosis, an over-curving of the upper back. And then the forward placed head was just something that I recognized, wow, my body right now is showing a super insecure, a super shy, guarded, heart-closed man. And that was how I was as a broken-hearted teenager that was grieving the loss of my mother that abandoned me and our family to try to save herself. And I didn't see her for 3 to 4 years during my pivotal teenage identity forming years. And I missed her a lot because I was very close to her. And so I was heartbroken, and my posture reflected that. I lost a sense of self-worth and confidence, and my physiology represented that. And there was a few years ago, so without skipping ahead, going back for a second, 4 years ago, when I recognized, okay, I can notice now I've been doing this work on my confidence, and I've been doing this work on loving myself unconditionally, and this healing journey and the spiritual journey, forming a really solid sense of self. And I'm feeling it more and more internally, but my physical body is not representative of the internal changes I've made yet. And the way that this works is we can, the manifest world is the slowest to catch up. And so we can shift internally quicker than we can externally. And then we will naturally over time automatically shift our external body to represent our inner world. And so I felt that call. Okay, I want to have a body that represents being open-hearted. Right now I'm slouched and guarded and hiding myself away, and I want to open my heart up. And so I started going to yoga to do that. That was my initial where I was drawn towards. If I can stretch and do these big asana sequences, and I can open up my body and gain flexibility to the stiff, rigid, misaligned body that I was holding. And I was wanting to really let my body be a demonstration of self-love. And so for many years before that, the reason my body was so stiff, tight, misaligned, guarded was because in my teenage years, I worked out like a crazy person. After my mum left, when I was 13, after a few years of feeling really kind of beat down and essentially victimized by my dad, who was a bit of an abuser, I started to hit the gym in my mid-teens, let's say 15 years old, and started working out to get big so I could take out my anger that I had channeled towards my dad and the world for what was happening with my home life and my family situation, and just wanted to get jacked so I could stand up for myself and protect myself. And I just built a really strong chest, really strong upper body, and just, it was essentially a shield away from my heart. Damn you, Dad, for betraying my trust and hurting my heart. And I'm heartbroken from my mum leaving. So I'm just going to layer these shields of muscle over my heart area. And I did that for years and years and years, and got super strong and jacked in a bit of a deformed body that was representative of a shielded heart. And so that was my exercise from teenager all the way through to mid-20s, and then even after my mid-20s. And then it was, okay, I want to open my heart to yoga. And I started doing that for a little bit, and then I moved to the States and during COVID. And my posture didn't really change much from yoga, to be honest with you. I probably did it for 6 months most days. And I definitely honored myself and felt really in alignment with doing it at the time. Then when I went over to the States, and I lived in LA briefly, I lived in Austin for a little bit. And when I was living in Austin, I went over to a Sacred Sons men's work summit. It was like a 4-day event called Convergence. And I went to Portland, Oregon, and this beautiful coastal scouts camp with 333 men participating in this event, and staying on this pine-laden coastal forest that was perched on a cliff. It was an incredible place. And while I was attending this men's work retreat, one of the leaders of the pod that I was in, let's say 25 people in the pod, and there were 3 or 4 leaders of that pod. One of the leaders of my pod group at this men's event was a posture expert, a movement expert. And he was talking about posture and movement, and what does the physical body tell us about someone's psychology and emotional world. And it was beautiful, it was powerful. And at the same time, I had a participant or a peer in my pod that came up to me and asked for permission to give me a reflection. And I was like, I'm open to that, dude. What's up? And he said, the way you walk does not match who you are. You're walking like you are hiding from the world. And this is like 3 years ago or less. You're walking around like you're ashamed of who you are. And I was shocked because I don't watch myself when I walk. So I had no idea. I was aware of my posture and working on my posture and whatnot, but I had no idea I was walking as pretty much a physical apology. And he gave me that feedback, and he said, try walking like this and I'll give you some feedback. And I walked with my shoulders back, and he's like, you still look like you're not walking with confidence. And then I really opened my chest up, and shoulders back, chest up, like really walking with confidence. And it felt so uncomfortable. I realized the gap between what my inner idea of what I looked like to the world and what I actually looked like was huge. And that was so confronting. I felt like I was saying, hey world, look at me, when I was just walking in actually a healthy, confident looking posture. I thought I was like Conor McGregor walking around, but no, it was just normal. But what I was actually normalized was walking around in a posture of shame and a posture of guardedness and fear. And that was a real wake-up call. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that that's how I'm showing up with the way that I'm walking too. And so when I left that workshop, I hit up the man that, you know what? I actually hit up the leader from that group that was an expert in posture and movement and all those kind of things to get him on my podcast a few months later. And I just moved from Austin to Costa Rica, lived in Costa Rica for 3 and a bit months, came back to Melbourne. And when I got to Melbourne, pretty much a few days after I landed, I chatted with this leader, this expert in movement and posture, and he blew me away with the podcast episode. It's still up if you want to go check it out. The guy's name's Pasha Ursan, and it was an epic interview. I definitely feel that if I interview him again, it could be a whole other realm of a conversation, because I was chatting with him in complete ignorance of the modality that he was an expert in, whereas I've been doing that modality for 2 years now. So it'd be a whole other conversation if I chatted with him now. And I'm kind of going to give the equivalent of that in this podcast. So just listen to this first, and if you feel called, go check that out after. But when I was interviewing Pasha on this podcast, what he was saying was resonating so hard with me that I asked if we could have a sales call on the podcast, like finish the podcast, record, press stop on record. And then I said, hey, can we chat about your coaching? I actually want to sign up. And I signed up for 12 sessions with him straight on that same call, because I was keen to work on my posture. And I did that for a little bit, and then had a bit of a break as I was training for this ultra marathon. And then I actually went to Thailand and worked with him full time for 7 days to work on my posture. Then I went back to Melbourne and I started to get I went to work with on this modality in Melbourne with one-to-one experts. And just to pause for a really brief second here, there is construction happening next door and I can hear it in the background. If you can hear hammering, that's what it is. I appreciate your patience with that. It's definitely annoying me as I'm doing this, but it's all good. Anyway, the modality of movement that has been supporting me with my posture, and that's completely shifted the game for me in terms of the way that I move, is called functional patterns. Functional patterns. People know it as FP. And functional patterns is by far the most advanced, legit, and powerful form of movement I have ever come across by 10, 20x. It is wildly powerful. And it's not wildly powerful because you're doing some weird moves that are just so odd and they're so out there. Like someone's going to do the splits and do a handstand splits. No, I'm talking powerful in a way of getting us to move the way that our anatomy is designed to move as human beings that were designed to live in the wild. That's how our body is, our hardware has been sculpted, and it has been deteriorating for the last 10,000 years slowly as we've gone from being foragers, hunters and gatherers, to becoming products of agriculture and farming, eating softer foods, living inside of housing, and not being nomadic, running, walking, throwing, jumping, and allowing our body to form in the way that it's designed to move. Just like if you had a dog and you made the dog start walking on 2 legs for its whole life, when it's designed to walk on 4, it's going to put a lot of pressure on its joints. It's going to completely shift the way that the muscles, bones, ligaments, and tendons, the way that they interconnect and the way that they form over time. And it is not going to be a healthy result. And so functional patterns is next level. And so I've been doing it I started with Pasha, I'm going to say like over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. But for the first year, I'm going to say, just discount that of me really having any effect because I wasn't consistent. But for the last almost 18 months, I've been doing Every time I'm in Melbourne, I've been doing two one-to-one sessions a week with an absolute beast of a expert in this modality. So once you get off this, go to the Functional Patterns website and go to the Functional Patterns Instagram. It's not functional training. It's a very specific modality with a big set of intellectual property, and it's called Functional Patterns. Very specific, and the founder's name is Naudi. And this guy is a genius of movement, He has created the most incredible system of regenerating the human body and restoring it to the way that it is designed to move. And it is unbelievable. So let's tuck into a little bit of this. So for me, this was a really big ego death in a way, because I was in that same addictive pattern of exercising and relying on intense exercise to manage my emotional state. And not that it's a really unhealthy way to regulate. It's better than doing drugs. It's better than doing heroin, but I was definitely addicted to it and not necessarily sitting with what was coming up for me. Since over the last 2 and a bit years, that's been relationship and the relationship pain. And so get really triggered, go for a 1 hour run or something like that. And I was training for the 100-kilometer ultra marathon, and it was my happy place, my escape, essentially. And so when I started Functional Patterns, one of the things that they do is similar to if you work with a nutritionist, and they've got an elimination diet protocol where you strip back and then you introduce things slowly to see what does and doesn't support. Similar to that, they have an elimination movement protocol. But instead of seeing what works and what doesn't, it's essentially don't do anything other than Functional Patterns while we're working on rerouting and reconnecting the way your body in the way that's meant to be connected. Now, that was a big letting go for me, because that whole reliance system that I had of managing my emotions with exercise was gone. So I had this extra anxiety, all this extra emotional heaviness to navigate out of nowhere. And that was damn overwhelming. And so celebrating myself for making a decision to prioritize the healthy alignment of my body and the longevity of my physiology over and above short-term hits to try to stay in control, essentially, of my state. But having the courage to sit in that, my gosh, that was really challenging. So if you go to functionalpatterns.com and you look at the case studies and the before and after photos, they're unbelievable. They've had a solid 100 to 300,000 students transform their bodies. And it's a relatively new modality. I'm talking 10 years, maybe 10, 12 years or something like that. Like really new, but ridiculously thorough, and it's groundbreaking stuff. But because it's so divisive, because the theory that underpins it is pointing at the problem. It's kind of like someone saying the schooling system doesn't work, and someone's developed an alternative way of doing school, and everyone's like, you can't break down all the schools, and just imagine the backlash. Similar to that, it's a way of moving that's natural. It's like actually helping us move the way our body is designed. But because it says yoga is not healthy for the body, weightlifting, not all weightlifting, but conventional weightlifting is not healthy for the body. Stretching is not healthy for the body. And then it has some really beautiful philosophy around how to be healthy with some parameters around that, which is stuff like you need adequate rest. You need to get sunshine on the skin. You need to be eating whole foods. These are basic, really solid principles. And so the functional patterns philosophy is very simple. And that is the way our physical body is designed to move is all foundationally geared towards being able to walk in a certain way, being able to run in a certain way, and being able to throw in a certain way and stand. So those four basic functions of human physiology. Our bodies are designed to stand in a certain way. We have certain muscles, bones, ligaments, tendons. There's a way that we would have been designed to stand. Like a dog stands on four legs in a certain way. It's not designed to, there's a way that it works optimally. And if you put a dog in like a cage, so it was in some weird way, or it was always on its back, its muscles going to atrophy, the interconnectedness between the muscle groups and the tendons and the ligaments and the joints will have different pressures and stuff on it because it's not designed to be on its back all the time. It's designed to be walking around with the physiology that it has. And you see this with certain dogs, species, breeds of dogs as well, like German Shepherds that are bred to have their back, its back legs lower down, and dogs that have been bred to look certain ways like dachshunds and how their physiology, or let's look at Jack Russells that get sore hips, hip joints and stuff because they've been bred in a way that's not natural, not healthy. So bottom line is we have been designed to move in a certain way, and the way that we have lost connection to that natural way of moving is where the injuries and the pain and the deformation of our physical body has come in. Now, that's pretty straightforward, right? Our body is designed, the human body has a way that it's meant to stand, which is very natural. If you look at a tribes person that has lived in the wild, that's just how you're meant to stand. The way that they run, that's the way you're meant to run. The way that they throw, that's the way you're meant to throw. It's just, that's it, because that's what we're meant to be doing. But when you take someone and have them sitting in a chair, which you don't really have in the wild, and hunched over a computer with the head forward, the parts of the body, because it still takes muscle tension to keep us upright if we are sitting in a chair. There are certain parts of our body that are being activated when we're sitting in a chair. And our body then adapts to what is more activated and less activated. And because instead of being a nomadic tribes person like our body was designed for, walking up to 40 kilometers a day and spending our time upright, conversing with other people, looking straight ahead, not looking down at the phone, there's a really big difference between the way that our musculature has atrophied in certain ways and been overactivated in certain ways. And so most of the time, the average person has that head poking forward. They've got their upper back rounded, which is called a kyphosis. And then they've got their pelvis and their hip area kind of pushed forward. So if you imagine looking at someone standing from the side angle, and you imagine seeing them with a rounded back, their head poking all the way forward, and them standing with their kind of like groin forward. So it's like they're leaning backwards with their hips forward, but their whole body's backwards, and then all of a sudden it curves at the upper back and their head pokes out to counterbalance the weight. Yeah. Or maybe it's that the head's poking forward when we're working all the time, and then the back curves to counter that. Or the forward head and the rounded back is a certain way, and then the hips are all the way forward to counterbalance. But then with the body being geared that way, over time, that the way that the body then walks with that is if the hips are pushed all the way forward, the upper back's rounded all the way, then what's happened is there isn't the appropriate way for our body to rotate at the hips, rotate in the rib cage, rotate through the shoulders, rotate with the head, because it's all stiffened and locked up. And so people are just completely losing the way to smoothly move. And that interconnectedness, because one thing, so that's like baseline collective problem. Not everyone has it as big, but if you look at people that have genetics that have been less modernized that have been modernized for less generations. So for example, if there are people living in Australia, let's say America, Canada, Europe, that have African genetics, African people were started farming and agriculture later than everyone else. They stayed in their tribe's way of being for longer, and therefore their genetics are a lot stronger. Their jawline's a lot stronger. Their muscular is a lot stronger. Their body is just genetically a lot more powerful because they haven't been generation by generation deteriorating slowly by sitting indoors for as many generations. It's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that, let's say, the average Western Englishman, the English, Irish, medieval England, and just going to say white people have been deteriorating their genetics for more generations than people from Africa, let's say, that were living in the wild, more in the way that their body was designed. And so not everyone's going to have that just general misalignment code that I just shared, that I got you to imagine from the side profile, but a lot of people do. Probably half the population or more on some level have that forward poked head, rounded back, pelvis all the way forward, and can't. Their body has lost the capacity to move because this is the next thing that I'll talk about on this. We are our bodies, I've always thought, because I got taught in physical education, learning basic anatomy at school, about everything in isolation. I got taught that what are the name of the different bones? What are the name of the different muscles? When it comes to working out in the gym, we work out key muscles. And so I've always learnt about them in isolation, knowing that there's big compound moves like squats or deadlifts that use a few different things, but it's still like, what do deadlifts hit? Lower back. What do squats hit? They hit quads, glutes, hammies. But when we're in the wild, a tribes person that's a hunter-gatherer is designed, our physiology and anatomy has evolved over like hundreds of thousands of years to move in a certain way, throwing a rock, throwing a spear, throwing a boomerang, and running is the main thing, because we are on two legs. So we are what's it called? The bipedal. I can't remember the exact term, but we've designed to move on our two legs, right? Whereas some monkeys are more like scattering around they use their arms and legs. Like a gorilla have their fists planted on the ground and they run with their arms and their legs. We just run on our legs. And that's an adaptation over time that's given us the genetic skill set, the physical skill set of being able to run. And that's how we're designed to run. We're designed to run. We're designed to throw. We're designed to stand. We're designed to walk. And that's what our genetics are made for. That's what our anatomy is made for. Now, when we go to the gym and we are just isolating bicep curls, or we're squatting, the percentage of time that a tribes person would spend having to push serious weight through a squat is pretty much never. Pretty much never. So let's say for someone to squat more than their body weight might happen When would a tribes person need to do that? Even if they're picking up a fish off the ground or a rock off the ground or something, that's more of a deadlift thing in a way, but it's still pretty rare. Whereas they're walking 40 kilometers a day. So what the body's actually designed for is walking, running, throwing. And that's what tribesmen would spend their time doing all the time. And then now we're getting in the gym and we're isolating in these weird movements just to try to get hypertrophy and really strong in each muscle group. But if you see a bodybuilder run, they look stiff and slow and weird. It's kind of like if you see a robot. You know, when you see robots walking around in little videos, this is the latest robot, and they're so jolty because the technology of the robot and the way that the robot's knee joints and everything is designed, it's very complex. But the nuance and the complexity of all the different slings of the muscle groups and bone sockets throughout the body is so advanced and so perfect that it's completely smooth. And when you look in contrast to a robot moving, and they're trying to emulate the human body, but it's not through it's okay. You look at the robot, they've got their shin, maybe they've got 2 steel rods, and then they've got the knee socket, and then they've got 2 rods or 1 big, strong metal joint. And so it's jagged. It's really stiff. But what's happening in our actual body is there are thousands of muscles through our body, and they're all tensioned. That's what keeps the human body upright. It's a skeleton. If you just had a skeleton, a set of bones, without tendons, without ligaments, and without muscles, the bones will just all fall to the ground. Just like if you see a vulture that's had at a wildebeest in Africa, and you look at the carnage a couple of weeks later when it's all dried out, there's just a bunch of bones on the ground because all the meat, ligaments, and tendons are gone, all the muscles. And so what keeps it upright? What keeps it stiff and together? It's actually cross-tensioning. So the bicep and the tricep pulling at the same time keeps it taut. Just kind of like if you're pulling, if there are 2 people pulling on a rope, then it's strong and it's stable in the middle and it's held up off the ground. But you imagine all the muscles through the body as like, I'm going to just Google how many individual muscles, how many muscle fibers in the body. Okay, there are more than 600 skeletal muscles in the human body, making up around 40% of the body weight. Okay, so 600. So just imagine 600 ropes all pulled in different directions through the jaw, through the skull, through the neck, down to the chest, from the chest round to the ribs, from the lats round in a crossway, all in these different directions. Kind of like if you're trying to tape up a box and you're like, okay, I'm going to do some tape this way, and I want to tackle it from different directions to make it as reinforced and strong as possible. If I just did tape in one direction, it's not that strong. If I do it in lots of directions, it's really strong. Just the body has got over 600 different muscles in the body, and they're going in all these different directions. So imagine ropes being pulled in a way that the tension between pulling one way, another way, another way, another way, 600 times is what keeps our body upright. It's tension. It's not like tension's bad, because if it was all floppy, you'd just fall on the ground. So it's cross-tensioning that balances itself out in perfection. And then when we walk, if we have a really solid anatomy, there's a way to walk and run that's smooth and perfect. And you look at the most elite athletes in the world, you got the runners from Kenya and you've got the sprinters from Jamaica, and the way that their physiology is created is not modernized and not atrophied and not deformed. It's working in tip-top condition, and the smoothness of watching Usain Bolt run versus watching a robot walk. You're seeing the perfection of the human body. Now, when we go into a gym and we're working out and we're doing bicep curls, that ain't how we're moving in nature. Ain't bicep curling. No one in nature, no tribes person ever is doing a bicep curl. Never. Why would a tribes person do a bicep curl? They might practice heaving up rocks where they're having to curve their back, they're having to use their glutes, their feet muscles, their hands, their traps, their lats, their chest, and they're heaving up the rock with all these different muscle groups. Not, let's isolate the bicep. That's actually detrimental for the interconnection between the biceps. Now, one thing that is worth Googling if you're interested is anatomy trains. Anatomy trains. Anatomy trains is a model of understanding anatomy through the perspective of strips of fascia, strips of muscles that are connected by fascia through the body, by a man called Thomas Myers. And Thomas Myers is one of the experts that's pioneered the idea that the human body is a tensegrity model, what I said about all the ropes pulling in different directions, and that's what keeps the muscles working really effectively, versus, for example, yoga and stretching that's like, pull it, keep pulling, keep stretching it, because the goal is having flaccid, loose muscles, whereas tight muscles are good. They just need to be cross-tensioned in a way that's balanced. And that's actually what keeps the body upright, with the shoulders sitting in a nice position and the chest sitting in a nice position and the hips and the glutes and the legs and everything just balanced perfectly. There's no tribes people or animal on the planet that spend time stretching for extended period of times. They do a little, I've just woken up, I'm just going to pump a little blood through my body for 5 seconds, but they don't stretch outside that. Their body gets the stretching it needs with cross tensioning. When an animal is running, if I'm running during the running technique, the full extension and motion, my body is stretching, contracting. My bicep, on part of pumping the arm forward as I'm running, the bicep is activating. And then as I pull that same arm down, the tricep is activating, but not in a isolated manner, in a super complex, dynamic pulling of these 600 muscles in this unique, complex, magnificent piece of art that is so nuanced and perfect in the most complex kind of way, that trying to get in there and manufacture physical strength in a way that's not interconnected is what's doing damage. Bodybuilding and isolating. No one in nature is bicep curling. No tribes people are bicep curling. They're running and walking in an obscene amount of time, and they're spending all their time utilizing their physical body, and that's why they have such strong physical bodies. They're eating, this is a little bit of a tangent, so don't worry about this too much, but they're eating meat. In a lot of cases, almost raw meat or raw meat, tearing it off the bone and chewing. That's why we used to have stronger teeth, big lower jaws, big, strong lower jaws, big flared nostrils. Like if you see African people, their nostrils are bigger because they need to take more air in, and their jaws are bigger. Their teeth are healthy looking. Whereas we, as essentially English, Irish, European, eating pasta, soft pasta and soft foods over time, we've lost the strength in our jaws, and it's atrophied our bodies, and they've become less strong over time. So the intention here is to recognize that modern culture has disconnected that tensegrity model, that balance between the muscles, the 600 plus muscles pulling in all these different directions. The balance of that, if you've got all these muscles pulling in all these different directions, and it creates perfect harmony and balance through the body, and then the way that they activate and work together in perfect symbiosis during a run or a throw is just perfectly nuanced. So there's no part of the muscles that are overstretching. If you take your finger and you just point, like you put your hand, like you're pointing your finger forward, and just point your pointer finger forward, and then you can pull that finger all the way down. I don't know if you heard my finger crack then, but if you pull it down, there's a lot of way that can go forward, and you pull it back and it can go back. When it's in the middle, there's a bit of give if you pull your finger back, and there's a bit of give if you pull it forward, right? There's some healthy balance in there. So it's got a bit of, it's kind of safe in that healthy balance. But if the body was overstretched in one way, like for example, if someone's sitting all the time and the back's rounded, that's the extremity of that movement. If your back's permanently rounded in this massive way and you try to round it further and it can't, it's on the edge of its movement potential. Just like if your finger was pulled back all the way and then all of a sudden something rammed into it, it's going to break. It's going to strain, stretch, break, tear. But if it's just pointing directly forward, you can bend it down, you can bend it up, and there's a bit of give both ways. Yeah, if you play with your finger, you know what I mean. Even if you just put your finger out, you grab it with the other hand and you can pull it up and down, and there's a bit of give in both directions. If it's in the middle, like the metaphor for the 600 muscles perfectly working together in balance and harmony, nothing's overextending. It's perfectly in this, it's got this perfect flexibility and range that means that there's give and there's no injuries going to happen because nothing's at the edge of its movement potential. Whereas if you bend your finger back all the way because it's strained or it's stuck in a position it's not meant to be in, then if you pushed it past that, it's going to break. Whereas if it's just pointing straight forward, there's give and there's room for it to move without it breaking and without damage to be caused. So if someone's sitting in a position regularly and it's causing their head to go forward, the head can't poke that much more forward. And so it's locked in an extreme position, which means that all the connecting of the 600 muscles that connect all the way out through the body are being pulled in different directions, and some are being over pulled, some are over lengthened, some are over contracted. And the stiffness and the rigidity that naturally forms in the body and the tendency for injuries to come into place is heightened times 10. And so what we need to do if we want to have a long living, able, healthy, strong body is actually tension it the way that it's meant to be tensioned. And there is work to be done if you're living in modern society. And so my body, for example, so just to pause, what actually exists in between the body with the 600 ropes? It's not, there are 14 muscles in the body. There's the bicep, the tricep, there is the quadricep, there is the hamstring, there is the calf, there is the abdomen, there is the chest, there is the neck. That is just so misleading in terms of how our anatomy works. Because again, there are 600 complex interconnected muscles that work with joints, ligaments, and tendons in an unexplainably complex way that is perfectly tensioned to have us move powerfully as we walk, and perfectly as we walk, perfectly as we run, perfectly as we throw. But if you just pull, if we're sitting all the time, what's instantly happening is we're forgetting how to use our glutes. If we're sitting all the time and we're not using our glutes, we're overusing our quads. So the quads become overly stiff. And it's not as linear as what I'm about to say. And I am not a full expert in this, but just to give you somewhat of an idea or something to kind of start to comprehend this situation, this predicament. If the glutes are atrophying and the glutes, so anatomy trains, let's pause for a second. Anatomy trains, essentially, if you look at Thomas Meyer's work and you just Google anatomy trains, as in like choo-choo trains, anatomy trains, you'll see, and it's far more complex than this, but it gives us more of an in-depth understanding of how all the muscle groups interconnect through the body. And so fascia is, if you buy raw meat and you look at the meat, and there's the red meat, and then there's the white parts that kind of you can see go through the meat. So if you cut along the white, like parallel to the white tissue, that's fascia. And you can have the kind of, let's use like a lamb tenderloin. If you look at a lamb tenderloin, Google it if you don't know what it is, but you can see the white. It's like a pocket of muscle. If you cut through it, you're cutting through the white fascia. If you cut along it, you've got the whole length of that section of white fascia that goes parallel to the muscle tissue, and it kind of engulfs it. And so this fascia is used in multiple ways, but a way that it's used is it groups together. It's kind of like how you have sausage and you've got the gut lining that's used to put all the minced meat and the salt and the pepper and the flavoring and stuff into the sausage, and it's put into the gut, the outside coating of the sausage, and it's holding all the muscle in there. Similar to that, you have fascia that encapsulates a big set, a big chain, a big train of muscle. And so if you Google anatomy trains, you'll see, okay, cool. There's an anatomy train. There's a group of muscles that go from right up, attaching to the base of the skull. It goes through the neck, down the back, around the side, connects and crosses over in the middle of the abs. It continues to go down a little bit through the glutes, down the quads, into the calves, and into the feet. And you can actually hold that fascia up. If you were to perfectly dissect that anatomy train, you could hold it, the fascia, from the top where the muscle is at the base of the skull. If you're dissecting a human body, you could hold up the muscle, the fascia, and it would be all connected. The muscles would be connected from the base of the skull all the way down to the feet. So the whole thing is interconnected with tension. And so if someone's neck is like pushing forward, their head's pushing and orientated forward, then the actual, the muscles that are connected to the base of the skull are pulling, and that's impacting that whole train. If you grab someone's wrist and you just, like you're revving a motorcycle, you pull the wrist up, then you're tensing the forearm. That's not just impacting the forearm. The forearm's then connecting to the bicep, which is connecting to the delts, which is connecting to the lats, and the lats connect down into the abs. And there are multiple layers. There is transverse abdominal abs. There is the outer layers of the abs. There's the inner transverse abdominals. There's the outer, like what you see with someone's six pack. There are multiple, there's like 4 or 5 different layers in the ab area. And they're not just sitting in there doing their thing. They're connected in different layers of fascia. So there's a layer of fascia from the deep muscles inside. They don't just sit in there and just do some isolated thing. They're all part of the ways that the ropes tie together, of these 600 ropes. And so if we're sitting all the time and we're developing an over-constriction where our body's all curved at the front and like hunched, the back's all stretched and curved, and the stomach is kind of, you got a rounded posture, and you kind of like your permanent posture is like you're doing an ab crunch, then all the muscles in the abs are all shortened. All the muscles in the back, because it's curved, are all lengthened. So you've stretched the crap out of all the muscles down the back and the way that they connect through the body. And you've shortened. Just imagine if someone's standing up tall and you're looking at from the side profile, and you get a rope that's long enough to go from someone's belt buckle on the front all the way up their stomach, chest, over their shoulder, down their back, and then to their hips on the other side. And you can hold it. So you're holding one end of the rope that's near someone's butt, and another one that's near their genitals. And then you imagine you tugging the rope down the front, so pulling the abs down, and then the rope on the back side is going up the back and down the front. That's kind of what happens with someone that has that rounded back, forward head pressing situation, is that all the muscles are all shortened because they're contracted, but then the rounded back is really long and stretched. So that integrity, that tensegrity model of perfect harmony between the balancing of all the muscles, fascia, ligaments, and tendons around the entire body, that's in perfect harmony and balance, that's just been completely put out of whack. And so if someone's, again, like if you have your finger pointing out and then it's stretched back all the way and then you put extra pressure on it, you're going to break it, or you're going to strain the muscles, or something's going to happen to that finger. If someone's walking around and their back is all stretched and their stomach's all contracted, just looking at that one dynamic between front and back on one fascial plane, if that's the situation, and then you give that person a bunch of weight on a deadlift and their back is already fully lengthened, it's just asking for an injury. Whereas if that person had the perfect tension around the entire body, then they're picking up a deadlift, or then they're running at full pelt. There's the perfect amount of movement and give throughout the body that it can hold the way that it's meant to move perfectly. And every little micro relationship between the 600 ropes, the 600 muscles that are, again, divinely orchestrated to work together in harmony, which is why we look so smooth if we are naturally set up, and less like a robot, which is the world's most innovative experts in the world that are masters of technology and creating robots still have their robots look all jolty and crap, whereas we are smooth. But the more that someone's anatomy is being stretched and messed with, then they start limping and more jagged and tight because their hips are tight, their glutes aren't connected. So apparently there's this triangle, and this is what I've been working on in my one-to-one sessions for 18 months, a couple of times a week, is connecting the deep inner core with the glutes, with the upper back. Because if that upper back is rounded and stretched all the time, just imagine that upper back, it's curved, the head's poking forward, the pelvis is tilting forward, the upper back's big, rounded in what's called a kyphosis. All those back muscles, because it's rounded and fully stretched out, those muscles are just forced into a lengthening position all the time. So they don't know how to contract. And if you can contract that thoracic spine, that upper back, so instead of curving over, you are actually almost like doing an ab crunch, but inverted, and you're popping the chest out from the back, that's creating some harmony and balance, because that's lengthened, flaccid, and weak. The abs are, and the chest is all tight and constricted. The shoulders are all curved over. If you can strengthen the thoracic spine, it's pulling the rope, it's strengthening the anatomy trains on the front side, all the ways that those muscles interact on the front side, and it's starting to create some harmony. But it's so complex that this functional patterns modality of movement have hundreds of different exercises that they call chambers, where instead of just doing a bicep curl, every single chamber, every single exercise that's being done, usually using some small weights or body weight or different tools like cable machines, to activate the entire body in the way that it would do when it's running, in the way that it would do when it's throwing, in the way that it would do when it's walking or standing, so that we can start to realign this imbalanced, misaligned set of patterning that is a product of modern culture. And that's what functional patterns is really about. And so when I'm doing functional patterns movement, it took me 6 months to even know what on earth my trainer was talking about. He spent 7 years deeply studying the body, and he would know more about the way that the muscles, tendons, ligaments work together in the way that they're meant to work together. He would know more about that than the average osteo, chiro, physio. Because the way that they've studied and been taught has been too much in isolation. So if you go to a chiro and you try to, my shoulder's out, they'll try to massage the shoulder, massage a little bit around the shoulder, but the person still has their body with over stiffness and contraction in different areas of their body because they're sitting behind a desk all the time, and over lengthened in other ways to try to compensate because the rope pulley system is all out of balance. So some things are too long, some things are too short. The tension, the tensegrity is all out of balance. And so they're going to leave. Cool, you got a little adjustment on your shoulder. Boom, they're going to walk the exact same way. They're going to sit the exact same way. And the interconnectedness between the muscles is the exact same level of problem than before they went in. And they're going to manifest the exact same injury, and it's just going to get worse over time. So the level of depth, of sophistication and understanding of how all the muscles connect together in such a complex way, taking into account tilts, shifts, rotation, spirals of the way that our muscles are all meant to work together. It's such a complex, it's like 3D, but so many elements. So I might be doing a bicep curl while I'm lunging, while I'm using my oblique system to pull and tilt and create a natural curve in my body, while my head is tilted forward and my neck is tensing in a certain way. And I'm focusing on 7 or 8 different things and creating the interconnectedness between them in the way that it's meant to be connected if I just was living in the wild my whole life. And the level of complexity that it requires for someone to be able to cue me into that position and start to build those and reconnect that 600 muscle pulley system to work in harmony and balance again is wild. And to then go into a gym and there's a PT saying, do a squat and just make sure you don't bend your back. It's so unhealthy and inadequate and causing so many problems for people. It's beyond comprehension. I feel like I know more about my body and how to stand, walk, move, pick things up in just the craziest, most beautiful, complex way now that it should just be innate, and it's getting more and more innate. But the understanding that I have of my body and addressing the root cause, the actual system and patterning of the way that I'm meant to move versus being like, my quad's sore, what's going on? That level of self-empowerment that I have is just unbelievable. I honestly feel like I understand more about my body than if I went and saw a physio, because they address the symptom, not the actual patterning and the root cause. And if I went in there and got the best massage and they put me in a sling, it ain't going to do anything compared to me addressing the way that I'm sitting, standing, walking, running, throwing, and working on it enough that it counteracts the damage that has been done to my body over, in my case, a couple of decades of living in a modern world that the body is not designed for. And so, hallelujah for functional patterns. It is a deep dive. You can't just do functional patterns as a side gig. It must be committed to. You have to go on a devoted journey with it to realigning the body and understanding it thoroughly so that you become a master of movement, the way that we're meant to move. And then you can discern how to move in amongst the modern landscape and architecture and make decisions that are healthy, that you know are healthy, and be the master of your own body first, and then start to get back into whatever you love to do most. If you came to me and said, Ryan, just based on your limited knowledge of functional patterns in the body, how could I approach this to have the best longevity in my body, the least injuries, the best strength, mobility, agility, speed, etc.? How would you approach that journey if you were me? And I would say, go see a functional patterns expert if you're lucky enough to have a gym in your city or a trainer in your city, because they're ridiculously qualified and powerful. And just get to work. Take a break from everything else. Use that break as an opportunity to be okay without your reliance and dependence on certain types of exercise, and get your body into alignment and get you understanding the way to move. And then you're going to be empowered in your own body for the rest of your life. It might take 3 to 5 years. I've been at this for, I'm going to say, almost 18 months, and done a couple of one-to-ones a week, and I do a little bit outside. I'm usually aware of what's happening in my body, so I can choose how I want to sit, where I want to position myself, and just little basics of activating different aspects to create stability in my body, and these little tinkering nuances as I go through my lifestyle. But I mainly just do these 2 one-to-one sessions a week. And I've learnt so much, even just being able to explain all this with my basic, limited, unqualified know-how. I feel like I know 10 times more than the average PT and 5 times more than the average physio or chiro in the areas that matter. So I am infinitely grateful having been exposed to functional patterns. I'm super grateful that I've had the courage personally to go on this journey and let go of some of my attachments to exercise in the conventional way I was doing it, so that my body gets healthier and healthier. Don't have lower back pain anymore. Don't get it, because my hips aren't stuck with my butt poking out, and I don't have so much pressure on my spine that was all contracted, because my body is so much more balanced now. Still got a long way to go. And I've got adaptations my body's made from playing sport that's very specific, like golf. So I'm using one half of my body in a specific way and the other half in a complete other way. So my body kind of contorted and manipulated itself to suit that movement pattern that I replicated tens of thousands of times playing golf twice a day for 8 years. So I've got a lot of things I've been working on with that, but I feel so much better in my body. And it's not super expensive, but it's not cheap either. And I've probably already spent over 10 grand on sessions. You definitely don't have to do it in one-to-one capacity, but my gosh, it is helpful. If I was to start from scratch again, I would go to functionalpatterns.com. I would buy their 10-week online course, which is $250 odd. 10 weeks. You get access to it for a year. And there is, let's say, 10 videos a week for 10 weeks. I'm just estimating 100 videos. And the founder of Functional Patterns, Naudi Aguilar, I think his last name is something like that. And he is a genius. He explains the why behind the exercises and the myofascial release technique, which is essentially like foam rolling, but more concentrated and targeted to be able to release some of the over-tensioning if certain areas have become so contracted from sitting in similar positions or moving in similar ways for a period of time, when that rope pulley system has been over-reliant on some of those ropes way more than needed, and it's built all this corrosion and calcification and stiffness. Myofascial release is a big part of it, and then these corrective movements. And going through that 10-week online course, I wish I'd done that before doing one-to-one, because the theory that's explained as you navigate through the videos by the founder of Functional Patterns legitimately makes me feel more educated in my own body than what I feel, like I said, a physio, chiro, or an osteo would have awareness around about my body and what it actually needs, just from listening to Naudi in the videos in the course. And so super cheap to do that. Do that first. Then if you have the extra funding and cash, highly recommend making that a priority and investing in a one-to-one coach to do further. But you can do the first 10-week online course online, and then there's a training course, which is another 10-week course that's a bit more advanced. And so you could do those two things, combined total of maybe $600, and you buy a few pieces of equipment to support with the exercises, and you're going to be miles ahead of anyone else on the planet. So I am just could not be more of a raving fan of Functional Patterns as a movement modality. They've also got other really amazing health protocols. There are some things that I don't like though, and that is the fact that they address things on the physical plane to support the mental, emotional, and spiritual layers of life with the theory and the hypothesis, we work on the body, the physical layer, and the other things are going to improve, which is true. That is true. You work on the physical layer, get the body aligned. It's going to mean that the way that oxygen and water is moving through the body as you're just walking is going to hydrate different bodies. It's going to have a positive effect on the hormonal body and all the hormones and the way that then your mindset works and mental health. Absolutely. It's going to have a really epic increase. And if someone's body's not functioning well and it's in pain, helping remove that pain by getting the body functioning effectively is going to have a super positive impact. But it ain't the whole edge of the equation. It's not the whole answer. But they're very, very divisive, essentially, and very, I would say, closed-minded. Yeah, because they are absolute freaks and experts at what they do, but because they've spent so much effort in that area, they're masters of that area, which is why I go to them for that. But they don't answer the full equation. So when I go to my one-to-one sessions and I'm chatting with the coaches, they're very attached to their perspectives, and there is not much point challenging them because they've got fixed mindset around what life is about and how to get the most out of life, which I'm behind. But I also have other perspectives that disprove some of the whole perspective that they have. And so I take everything that I can on the physical layer, and then I apply the other layers that have made super profound impacts in my life as well. So if you are going through your life now and your body structure, posture is impacted, this is one of those decisions that you could make that would have such a positive long-term impact, but would take some short-term pain, not in the conventional sense of you're going to have to go through lots of physical pain, because this modality is not about, it's against the culture of pain for gain, more pain, more gain. It's more about, how about you just have a sensible, mature, grounded, healthy perspective on your body that is built off a sense of self-worth, where it's not about looking massive or proving how good you are in the gym, but just about caring for the body in a really effective way with strength training in a super wise and effective way that is tailored as closely as possible to getting us moving in the way that our body is designed to move. It's called gait. The gait cycle is the complex combinations of spirals and contractions, extensions, lengthening in all these different ways between all the areas of the body when we're walking and running. That's called gait, working on your gait cycle. And a lot of people will be like, try to put your knees up higher when you're running. And that's just, it's like someone saying, building a car, just make the wheels bigger. It's like, mate, what are you talking about? It's just so much complexity and nuance to the miracle of an organism that we are, that is designed so crazily perfect. It's kind of like the miracle of like how life is created. Like we can code a game and put in the parameters to see a 3D character on a screen in a video game, but to be able to design the intelligence that between mother and child in the way that the placenta works as a intelligent organism that is literally like a big squishy piece of flesh that literally filters through and breaks down exact nutrients that are needed and then just puts waste through the same blob of organic matter. And there's like different chemical compounds and proteins and energy sources, carbohydrates and different atoms and molecular pieces of living building blocks and matter going back and forth through the same. Just imagine having a piece of jelly and you can just put on one side of the jelly some nuts and it just starts pulling out the little factors, like aspects of the nuts, and then it's taking things from the growing body that's building this complex. It's so crazy. Try replicating that with a robot. It's like, good luck. Good luck. It's probably going to happen at some point with rising technology, but my gosh, is it complex. And that's the equivalent of the complexity of the way that the body moves compared to the way it's shown in a PE textbook of, we have biceps and triceps, and we have our forearms, and we have a chest. So we've got 600 different muscles interacting in the most complex, crazy way, attaching to different bones at different points, layered through different trains of fascia with pockets of muscles, and this crazy cross-tensioning model that's perfectly designed for running and walking. And we're just not doing it justice. We're just not doing it justice with conventional movement. And that's why so many people have injuries, because they're overextending and wrecking the balance of that tensegrity model. So go check it out if you're interested in it. And I've created a little bit of a cheat sheet kind of email thing that I've sent to clients to say, if you want to learn more about functional patterns, go check out this random list of different videos, some from YouTube, some from Instagram, and here's what course to do and blah, 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 just because it's overwhelming to get started with, and it's polarizing, I guess, and it's a whole other world that's very confronting. So highly recommend it. It will be something that your future self thanks you for a million times. You just have to look on their website and on their Instagram to see before and afters, and watch the videos I send through, or just do your own exploring just to see the level of nuance. They don't show any of their movements online because they're very protective of their intellectual property with what they call their chambers, all the different myriad of exercises. So you really don't get a gist of the level of complexity of what you go through in the courses, which is, the courses are very basic compared to what's gone through with a one-to-one functional patterns teacher. It costs a lot of money to become a functional patterns practitioner, and many, many years of getting lots of people results to fully qualify. Like infinitely more rigorous than becoming a PT. So it's next level. Highly recommend it. I am so grateful, and I'm early on in my journey, and I'm devoted to it for as long as it takes for me to get my body into a great way. And then I'm going to use it for maintenance. And I really feel like the combination of downloading the wisdom that's on offer from Naudi and functional patterns into my awareness, and then testing and learning more about my body every single month and year. And I'm not crazy devoted with it. I'm not doing new things every single day and someone that's like, I work out for life. It was more just, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to smash myself on a run. I'm feeling insecure, I'm going to do a gym program and get jacked. So I've never really been one of those people that's like, I live for movement and understanding every nuance of my body. It just automatically happens by being involved with functional patterns. So I feel like it's one of those life-changing decisions that's done on maturity for long-term gain and short-term gain of how you feel in your body, but for for longevity of the body and of life. And so I put a fair bit of cash into it, a big portion of my spare budget into supporting myself to navigate through life in this flesh suit that I wear as healthily as possible. And I'm stoked about that. So highly recommend it. If you want more info about it, just flick me a message on Insta or Facebook, on Instagram at @TheRyanMagic, or shoot me an email, ryan@ryanmagic.com, and I'll flick you the resources of recommended videos and stuff. But you can just do your own research on Instagram, YouTube, etc. And just to also shout out my coach, Fiactra, or Fee, from Functional Patterns Melbourne. It's one of the most elite functional patterns gyms in the world. There are lots of layers and levels of qualification that you can go through. And there are 3 elite, fully qualified trainers there. And there are like 2 or 3 other trainers that aren't as elite, but still super competent because they're spending their time in the same environment as these other elite trainers that have been training people constantly for 7+ years. and just relearning and doing more advanced programs and just tinkering, immersing, and mastering their bodies to the best that they can. They're still not perfect. Even Naudi, the founder of FP, is not perfect, but if you compare it versus conventional movement, yoga, stretching, bodybuilding, powerlifting, and just the general culture of you're not doing good enough, you need to be ripped and push yourself, and people projecting their insecurities into over exercise that leads to injuries and over stress on the nervous system, it's a whole other level. So anyway, that's enough on functional patterns and my movement journey. I'm on that journey. I've pulled back from everything else for now, and gladly so. I'm so grateful for that. And it's going to give me a long life that I can use in the most perfect version of my body that I can possibly have. Yeah, it's not the perfect body, but for my body, I'm going to make it as optimal as it's possible to be, given my genetics and given my setup. And that's going to be something that I already am thankful for, but continue to have gratitude for the rest of my life. So woo for functional patterns. All right, guys, if you haven't left a review on this podcast channel, please do it. It means the world to me. I love you guys. I appreciate you all. And yeah, we'll put a link to some of the resources of functional patterns in the show notes. Epic, over and out. See you guys next time.